Hello and welcome. My name is Zaffar Iqbal, and you are watching the Mojo Story. Exactly a year ago, Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, stood up in Canadian Parliament and said that agents of the Government of India were responsible for the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a Canadian citizen who India said was a Khalistani terrorist. He has now said for the first time that Khalistani supporters are on Canadian soil. All this amid the ongoing diplomatic row between the two countries. He added that they do not represent the Sikh community as a whole in that country. But he also said that there are Hindu supporters of Prime Minister Modi in Canada, but they also do not represent the Hindu community as a whole. Important that he accepted that there are Khalistani supporters in Canada. The question is that's exactly what India has been saying, that there are Khalistani extremists and supporters in Canada who are engaged in anti-India activities. But what is Canada going to do about it? Has Canada done anything? Is Canada going to do anything about that? That's the question that we are asking. We're joined by an eminent panel from Canada. We're joined by uh, Terry. Terry is a senior journalist based in Canada. Welcome to the show, Terry. And we're also joined by Major General Dhruv Katoch, who's the director of India Foundation. Welcome to Mojo Story, sir. And we are also joined by Ambassador Manju Seth, as a former diplomat. Welcome to the show, madam. If I may ask you, Terry, how significant is this sort of a statement that he's saying that there are Khalistani supporters in Canada, but they do not represent the Sikh communities, trying to make a distinction between Khalistanis and Sikhs?
Well, it's a little late, isn't it? For one thing, I mean, some of us have been trying for the better part of 40 years to persuade political leaders in Canada that there is a distinction, and a very important distinction, to be made between Sikhs on the one hand and Khalistanis on the other. These are not the same thing, and they've been treated as the same thing, to the point that Trudeau personally, when he first came to power in the 2015 election, which brought him to power in Canada, he was preferentially imposing upon local constituencies of his Liberal Party, imposing upon them pro-World Sikh Organization candidates, shall we say. That's a separatist organization, of course, as you know. And then if you complain about it, well, wait a minute, why does it have to be a WSO candidate that you're picking? Why are you imposing them upon the Liberals in the local riding association, for example? And at one point, one of his senior aides, in fact, his chief of staff at the time, said to me, well, Terry, I suppose you're going to do a story about the Sikhs taking over the Liberal Party. As though, actually, I was doing a story about Sikhs who are walking out publicly in protest against the Liberal Party because of Trudeau favoring Khalistani candidates. Right. And so, in other words, they had the story completely backwards. They did not understand what was happening. They thought that the real Sikhs were the ones from the World Sikh Organization, and the Sikhs, turbaned, bearded, Amritdhari Sikhs, who were walking out of the party in protest against this tendency, that they didn't count. They weren't real Sikhs. So they really didn't get it. And it is a good thing, and we should welcome it, that Trudeau is finally saying that these are not the same thing. However, he's both sidesing it, as they say in the States.
Exactly.
Now.
Yeah.
But he's immediately segueing into the other half of the sentence, which is, of course, the people who support Modi, they don't represent the Hindus. Right. Well, so he's only halfway there, really, in understanding that. But that really, we do have to remember that it's not, there is no equivalence between both sides. When one side for 40 years has been beating and killing people, and to include blowing up a civilian airliner in 1985, the Kanishka, of course, with the loss of 331 completely innocent civilians, an absolutely outrageous and historic atrocity in the annals of terrorism, and killing their critics, killing witnesses at trial. That hasn't been the Hindus doing that. That's been Khalistanis as opposed to Sikhs.
Right. And I was coming to this point. This is really appropriating Khalistanis with the supporters of Prime Minister Modi Before we go to the other panelists, let us play that soundbite of Justin Trudeau. What exactly he said about Khalistanis and Sikhs in Canada, and how did he, in the same breath, speak about Hindus and Prime Minister Modi?
There are many supporters of Khalistan in Canada, but they do not represent the Sikh community as a whole. There are many supporters of the Modi government in Canada, but they do not represent all Hindu Canadians as a whole.
General Dhruv Katoch, this is a cleverly worded statement. He is saying that Khalistanis are in Canada, but they do not represent Sikhs. Fine. But at the same time, in the same breath, he's saying that, like the same way, Hindus in Canada, there are Hindus in Canada who do not support Prime Minister Modi. How are the two equal?
Zaffar, I think this is a very clever statement made by Mr. Justin Trudeau. You know, what he's trying to do, he's putting two people on the same equivalence, the Khalistani terrorists on one hand and the Prime Minister of India on the other. In my view, it is a very reprehensible statement. You see, the point is, there are a large percentage of Indians of various religions, Hindus, Sikhs, and other religious groups who have come from India and who are now Canadian citizens. I have met, every single Canadian citizen I have met who's of Indian origin, please take it from me, his first loyalty is to Canada. That's his country now. And they're totally loyal to the country. Now to start dividing them to say that, okay, this chap is, he's a supporter of Mr. Modi and he's a supporter of so-and-so. Everybody may have their preferences. But as far as the Hindu community is concerned, it doesn't work that way. And as far as the Sikh community is concerned, I think it was a very insidious movement made by some people to, to lump all the Sikhs with the Khalistanis. There are two distinct groups. In fact, the only place where Khalistanis are really surviving today, to a very large extent, it's in Canada, to a lesser extent in the United Kingdom, and then there are pockets of them in Germany and in the United States. In India, you don't see them at all. So this is something that people need to understand. When there is a terrorist action carried out by a particular person in Canada, I will even hesitate to call him a Khalistani. I will simply call him a Canadian terrorist. He's a citizen of that country. That country is responsible for him. He has sworn by the constitution of that country as and when he went in there. So he's got nothing to do with India or nothing to do with Khalistan.
If he wants, General Saab, the point is that they take out anti-India rallies, they glorify the killers of a former prime minister. How can this not have a connection with India? This is directly they're inciting violence against India.
Yeah, Zaffar, this is the second part I wanted to get into. Now, the question is, when they do not represent the Sikh community, yet they are being kept there to propagate this particular viewpoint, that they are actually being used as a tool of foreign policy. I'll make myself very clear. They are being used as a tool of foreign policy by the government of Mr. Justin Trudeau, supported by elements within the United States, to keep India under pressure on various fronts. You see, you want to change India's foreign policy, you make it more aligned perhaps on the Ukraine war or in any other issue. These are the whipping babies. We saw what happened in India in 2015 or 2016, I'm forgetting which year it was, when suddenly, there was a mass of outrage that the churches in India are being attacked. And of course, when an examination was carried out, they found out it was all fake. And it coincided with Mr. Obama's visit, you see. And the president of the US made a mention of it. These are really, then again, the farmers' strike. What we saw in Delhi on Republic Day. So these are various people propped up by certain governments to act as instruments to pressurize the Indian government on its foreign policy. I'll put it as simply as that. Therefore, in my view, I don't call them Khalistani terrorists. I simply call them Canadian terrorists on Canadian soil. How they are dealt with is up to the government of Canada. I'm glad at least Mr. Justin Trudeau has acknowledged that. I think it is in very poor taste that he has equated those terrorists with the Prime Minister of India, which is why you have persons like Mr. Elon Musk tweeting on X very specifically that
We
Mr.
have that
Justin
tweet.
Trudeau is
We have
out
that
for the
tweet.
next election.
We
You
have
see,
that tweet. If you can
so,
put
so
it up on
yeah.
the screen, yes.
So you see, here, this is what I'm saying. Now that a dispensation is changing in the United States, you are going to find this change coming about in Canada also. There is this particular, this particular lobby, this left Islamist, communistic sort of lobby, who call themselves liberal, who are the most illiberal in their thought. These are the type of people who propagate this, and they're supported by certain governments. So the
Right.
Canadian government is not supporting a movement in India. They are supporting certain of their own citizens to carry out certain disturbances in India to suit their foreign policy goals. Zaffar.
Ambassador Manju said that General Katoch saying that there is a bigger game at play here. But how do you analyze Justin Trudeau's latest statement, the equivalence of Khalistanis and Hindu supporters of Prime Minister Modi?
I think it's absurd, absolutely absurd. And I agree with General Katoch that this kind of narrative that is being created by him is totally unacceptable, uncalled for. I mean, there is no comparison. What are you talking about? Those are terror-related groups. Very rightly, I agree entirely with General Saab that this is rubbish. They are terrorists. What are you talking of Hindu supporters? They're not Hindu terrorists who are supporting Modi, or Modi is not a terrorist. PM Modi. So I don't know what is in his mind, but yes, it's the only plus point in all this is that he's finally acknowledging that there are Khalistani elements, and that he is, and that they are there on Canadian soil, and all Sikhs are not, Khalistani. There are only some who support this. I think that we've been saying for a long time that these are certain elements. And who are saying we're Khalistan chahiye. But what is this rubbish? Where do they want Khalistan in India? Do they want to divide India? I mean, what are they talking about? Why don't they divide Canada for the change? Justin Trudeau should encourage them and to form a state there. And Quebec, if somebody had to say something about Quebec, would it be acceptable to Canada? I think they are he's really, I don't know on whose behalf, and it's likely that it's the other, the US and the previous administration, the current administration, who is encouraging him to follow this path. It's highly likely. And of course, again, we don't have credible evidence, as he has been talking about, to use Trudeau's words. But yes, it looks very likely that they are behind this. And there have been reports about the deep state in the US also playing a part in all this, to put India, as our former ambassador to the US had said, that they would like to hold, India is using Trudeau to hold India's feet to fire. There's literally a kind of pressure on India to keep on, to keep putting and to sort of toe the line. We have been used. We have been not following what exactly is told to us. And India is an emerging economy; it's growing, and we've got a certain heft now, and we would like to be heard. But they're not very happy with that. I think the powers that be, the Western powers.
Terry, the point is that Justin Trudeau's latest statement, admission that there are Khalistanis active on the Canadian soil. But if you take that statement in totality, it has really not helped the situation. It's even complicated it even further.
Well, it certainly doesn't solve the diplomatic impasse. I mean, Canadian-Indian relations, as we all know, are at a historic low now. I mean, they barely have any relations. They've kicked each other's diplomats out. We're at rock bottom. So how do we get out of it? Well, one way, I suppose, is to encourage politicians like Justin Trudeau to admit that, yes, we got a Khalistani problem in Canada, which is a big step forward because they denied that for so many years. However, there is something else. It's not just for one side in this. It does take two to tango. There are two sides of this dispute, and India must deal with its side also, and that is the cause of the impasse. The cause of the impasse isn't Trudeau saying or not saying something about Khalistanis. The cause of the impasse is the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Surrey, British Columbia, and the evidence presented by Canada and the United States, which is clear and convincing and voluminous, that somebody in the Indian government was involved in plotting Nijjar's demise. The killing of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil. Now, India, of course, says, well, Canada's produced no evidence. Well, first, I don't believe that for a minute. Second, we can all see the evidence. And it's in the two now, not just one, but two indictments presented by the FBI in court in New York. And those indictments will have to be dealt with. Remember that the Indian government, although it has said that Trudeau's allegations are absurd, turns around and says the same allegations were made by the FBI. Oh, well, we take those very seriously. Well, which is it?
Terry, India is
contradicted itself. So
yes. These are two cases. One is about Panun, and the second is about Niger.
No. Sorry. That's not the case. If you read the indictment itself quotes the person indicted as saying this murder plot, is targeting Panun and Niger in Canada. It's one plot with multiple targets. That's the fact. You can't say they're separate. They're not separate.
Right. Now, that's a point that that obviously, if you connect the dots and bring the two cases together, but India is dealing with the cases separately. India says that US has provided some sort of an evidence and they're looking into it. India has also initiated an investigation into that. India is saying that Canada has not provided an evidence, and that is why they're looking at that case differently. Now, that is the position of the government of India. But I want to come to you on another point, Terry. All along, the government of Canada has been saying that there is freedom of speech, and that is why these people have the right to protest and assemble. Although they are violent at times, we saw what happened at Brampton. They carry out rallies which are very inflammatory, and they provoke violence in India when they carry out those rallies of glorifying the killers of a former prime minister. All this in the name of freedom of speech. But just a couple of days ago, Australia Today, which is a media outlet, had put up an interview of India's foreign minister. Now, after that interview, there are reports that Australia Today was blocked in Canada. Doesn't it show double standards that on one side, Canada is saying that there is freedom of speech and that's why they can carry out these activities? On the other hand, a media outlet is blocked, according to reports, just for airing the interview of India's foreign minister.
Well, this is an important point, but unfortunately, I think there's a serious misunderstanding. This story would be appalling if it were true, but I don't think it's true. Here's why. I'll be very brief. Canada introduced legislation 18 months ago requiring big tech companies, Google, Meta, and so forth, to pay content providers whose news reports they put on their site. You can't profit. The theory was you can't profit from the work of reporters and editors by just putting it on your site and cashing in without paying them. And Facebook said, no, we're not going to pay. So we're not going to put that page on our service in Canada. And so that's why some people, if they approach this particular Australian site on Facebook, not anywhere else, but if they insisted on seeing it on Facebook, they couldn't see it. Nothing to do with any censorship by Canada. That was all a mistake in my view. I remain very convinced. However, your broader point is about the hypocrisy that is suggested by that. Even if you discount that case, and I do, I think that whole story is baloney. Yeah. The point about freedom of speech stands. The point about freedom of speech is that Canada is saying it's all freedom of speech when you're parading down the street in Brampton, Ontario, on a truck celebrating a life-size diorama of the assassination of Indira Gandhi in 1984. Or you're holding Vaisakhi parades for 100,000 people in Surrey, British Columbia, and what do you see every time? Of course, you see a life-type poster glorifying the Air India bomber himself, the worst mass murderer in Canadian history. And the point is, never mind legal sanctions, locking them up. Never mind all of that. I'm not recommending that these people who put up these posters should be locked up. I think they should be denounced at a very minimum by the political leadership in Canada. I think political leaders should refuse to attend such parades. I think they should call them out and make it clear that they stand for something and that they're going to denounce in the harshest terms the glorification of terrorism. Until they do that, we can't expect them to do much more. I don't think that Canadian politicians should go around and lock people up and abolish freedom of speech. I think that they should show some courage for once and stand up and say, sorry, I know that you give me some votes at election time, but I'm not showing up at your Vaisakhi parade as long as Tawinder Parmar's poster is plastered on the side of your Gurudwara.
And we'll specifically talk about the system, how the system is dealing with such elements. But on the point of Australia today, actually the MEA, which is the Indian Ministry of External Affairs, its spokesperson gives a weekly press conference, and in that specifically talked about this media outlet and its blocking in Australia, in Canada. Although you say that it was blocked for technical reasons on Facebook.
Forgive me for interrupting. I just want to point out, I'm in Canada. I can see that site, no problem. I click on the site. It's completely free to me. It's completely accessible. Only if I go to Facebook and try to see it there is there a problem.
Right. Let's play that soundbite of the MEA about this particular issue.
And the particular media outlet also had several articles on the visit of the External Affairs Minister, as also an interview of External Affairs Minister. So we were surprised. It looks strange to us, but nonetheless, what I will say that these are actions which yet again highlight the hypocrisy of Canada towards freedom of speech. You would have seen that EM in his media engagement interaction, he spoke about three things. One was Canada making allegations and a pattern has developed without any specific evidence. Second thing he highlighted was that surveillance of Indian diplomats have been happening in Canada, which he termed as unacceptable. And then third thing which he highlighted was the political space which is being given in Canada to anti-India elements. So you can draw your conclusions from that, why the Australia Today channel was blocked by Canada.
Right. General Katoch, coming to the point of system, as Terry was saying, that at least the politician, the leader should show some courage to denounce what is happening. They may not just put them in prison and jail, but they should show some courage that what is wrong is wrong. They should say that. But here we have a situation. A few days ago, there was this incident at Brampton, just at a temple. Now, what happened that there was clashes. There were Khalistani supporters who were holding Khalistani flags in their hand, and they clashed with the worshippers. In fact, they sort of attacked those worshippers who were present there. And it was an event that was being organized by the Indian consulate. The point is that after those videos surfaced, in one of the videos, there was one person who was actually a Canadian policeman, an off-duty policeman at that site, who was siding with the protesters. Of course, the police started their investigation. He was suspended. But this is a small example that the confidence of all these elements, they can get away. They can do it and they can get away. It is an all-time high. That is why they can go about and they can clash with those worshippers. And of those people who were protesting, one of them, in fact, a policeman who was off duty on that particular day.
Zaffar, it's become very clear. If let us say a person is in the United States, a US citizen, and he makes the statement that I'm going to bring down this aircraft and blast it out, he'll be put under arrest. There's no question of freedom of speech that you can say anything and get away with it. Or if a person puts up a tweet and says, okay, I'm going to assassinate the US president, right? Regardless of who that person is, he'll be taken down. So I haven't understood why such statements which are made by people of causing distinct harm to the airlines industry and to other people is taken so lightly by the government in the name of freedom of speech. In this particular case of the temple, I think it was pretty ghastly the way the whole thing played out, because there were very senior citizens there of all communities. There were Sikhs there and there were Hindus there in that temple, and they were being assisted on certain issues, and they were attacked. And they were attacked fully well. You have a look at that, you see, and they were attacked for no rhyme or reason. And the question is, the due warning had been given, to the Canadian government, to the police department, Yet, it may become a law and order issue. Please post some people there for assistance. Now, they didn't do that. And ultimately, when the incident did took place, they take up a small little boy who was there to defend this temple, a 16-year-old, and they beat him black and blue. Now, I haven't really understood this very concept. But getting down to the larger point, I think, what Mr. Milewski said, he was absolutely, I've been educated on that. Canada does have certain laws in as far as Facebook and all are concerned, because they're not paying their dues. I think 3% or something they're required to pay, and they're not paying it. So their thing has been put across. So to that extent, yes, it is not a freedom of speech. But on the other point, there is something in the, which people haven't understood about the Punjabi community, the Sikh community. There is a lot of inter-Sikh rivalry for control of Gurudwaras. And that extends right from, it doesn't matter which part of the world it is from, it gets right into India also. That it is that clash. It is that clash which we saw playing out in Canada, in which this Niger chap was killed. It has got nothing to do with the government of India. They are very capable of eliminating their own people, and there will be more such clashes by which these people, they try to do it. I have seen this not now, I've seen this right from the 60s and 70s in Punjab. It was something which is, it is something like the Wild West there. They don't like to go to the courts to sort out their problems. You just take out a gun and you sort it out the way Niger has been sorted out. He was the head of, they're controlling the Gurudwaras. Niger was controlling a Gurudwara. Somebody else wanted control. He was inconvenient. He was taken out. It's as simple as that. That chap may or may not be a terrorist. I really don't know. But when we look into the American case, you see there was a chap who was trying to employ somebody to hit another Sikh. And he was being controlled, as they say, by somebody from India on television, on the internet. Now, everybody brags, there have been enough people in India to say that I have killed Osama bin Laden. Now, that doesn't give it any credence. In our own police department, I have seen people confessing to each and everything under the sun, right to killing of Mahatma Gandhi, though they were not even born then. So that is no evidence. Evidence means that, okay, here is a person, here is a thing, and there is a gun. In the American case, they've got some sort of a gun which also won't stand any court, including the American court. The Canadian case, they don't even have that, they don't even have that fig leaf of an evidence. So I'm afraid that's not going to work. I think Canada needs to look very seriously into the control of the Gurudwaras, to what hate preach is being done in certain Gurudwaras, and how that system works. It is ultimately, it boils down because Canada is a very prosperous country, and the Canadian Sikhs are a very prosperous community there. And the amount of money which comes into the Gurudwaras becomes a huge fund. And it is that fund which also goes into electioneering, which supports Mr. Justin Trudeau. And that is why he continues to give support to the Khalistanis. Now, he doesn't get that sort of a money from any Hindu temple or something, because the systems are different. It doesn't play out that way. So this has got a great deal to do with the control of the Gurudwaras. But even otherwise, to call this chap a Canadian citizen, I think it is itself a misnomer. He has come to Canada on a fake visa. Why has Canada still kept him? It's a shame. They know about his terrorist antecedents, yet they keep him. So there are ulterior motives involved, simply to say, okay, he's a Canadian citizen. It is all right. He's a murderer. He's a terrorist. He's a rapist. But, he's my citizen and I will look after him and I will spoil my relations with a neighboring, friendly, democratic country because a murderer of my country has been taken out. Come on, which diplomat will do that? I think this is something which the citizens of Canada must introspect very deeply about the type of government they have elected there. This is the way I look at it.
Terry, you may want to respond.
Well, I would only say that for Canadians, there is another side to that issue, and that, of course, is if our friendly neighboring democracy, India, with whom we've long tried to have better relations, both sides have tried to improve relations, if the government of India did indeed consider it could get away with sending murderers into Canada to murder a Canadian citizen, then that is a real problem. Then, yes, India should introspect as well. And as far as we know, according to the FBI's evidence, there was indeed such a plot. And as far as we know also, the Indian government has not challenged those allegations. They have named and shamed and fired the person accused, right?
Right.
Vikram Yadav, an official of RAW at the time, right? So that doesn't sound to me that the Indian government even disputing. Yes, they disputed in the Canadian case, but in the American case, they do not. So it sounds to me as though there's some credence to be placed in the American allegations, and the Indian government is not challenging them. Well, if that's the kind of government that Indians want to have, then that's a question for Indians to consider, just as it is for Canadians to consider whether we have spent 40 years pandering to Khalistanis and need to change course.
Quickly, General Katoch, before I go to Ambassador Manju Seth.
Yeah, very quickly. You see, as far as this Panu chap who has been killed, the people who killed him have been arrested.
Niger.
Sorry, the Niger chap who has been killed.
Yeah.
The people who have killed him have been arrested by the Canadian police. Come on, can't you find out from them what has happened? They are in the custody of the Canadian police.
Who paid them? Who paid them?
Well, you ask them, they'll tell you.
Right. So
They're
that
in your
is
custody. You can get that is the smoking gun which you've got. Now, please sort it out.
the investigations are ongoing. What has happened? Coming to the larger question of Panun, we were talking about Canada and Niger, but the issue of Panun did come up. And he's openly and brazenly saying that people of India should not travel on Air India or on particular days. Now, there can be no bigger incitement to violence than this. How can a person threaten people to not to fly on a particular airline on a particular set of days? It's just unbelievable it is happening. I don't know how should the government of India has been registering a protest with US, with all those governments who are actually sheltering Khalistanis, but this particular individual has been doing it year after year. He is inciting violence. He's glorifying the killers of Indira Gandhi. Manju Seth, do you think that this thing over the last couple of years or 3 years, they just got emboldened, whatever be the reason? We're seeing these repeated threatenings, repeated provocations coming from, particularly from Panun.
Absolutely. And I think, again, the US government, again, seems complicit in all this, I think, in not putting a stop to his threats and putting, ensuring that he doesn't do anything, doesn't carry out his threats. But there were all these, threats to all our airlines. The airline industry was badly disrupted over a period of time after he issued those threats. So I think the US government also needed to take more stern action, take cognizance of what he's saying, and also to ensure the safety of passengers, because it's not only if they're Indian airlines, it doesn't mean only Indians are flying on it. All nationalities would be flying on these aircraft. So to issue these kind of threats, I think is totally not acceptable. And the US government has not taken the required action, the requisite action, because apparently it seems he is also sort of, according to some reports, embedded in their with the CIA or some such thing I was reading. So I'm not sure. I don't know if it's true or not, but this kind of reporting was there. And another point that I just like to mention in all this is that we've been saying that these Khalistani or pro-Khalistani elements, etc., are all, they've been targeting Hindus, they've been targeting others, but they've also been targeting our diplomats. They've issued death threats to them in Canada. This is not at all something which is routine. It's not something which a normal citizen of a country does. You don't go around issuing, even if your relationship may not be the best, you don't allow your citizens to issue threats against diplomats of another country. This was going on openly and nobody took any action. Freedom of speech is what they said again.
Right. Panun threat on people flying a particular airline has a context, because there is a Kanishka bombing case that has happened. Actually, a bomb blast has taken place. People have died in the past. So that is why these threats cannot also be taken lightly. But before we wrap up, quickly, last word, Terry, then we can take the last word from General Katoch and Manju Seth. Quickly, what do you have to say? Every day we see new developments taking place between the relationship between India and Canada, and nothing seems to be going in the positive direction. Every day, it just seems that it's dipping down every day, one day at a time. We're seeing another development today. Justin Trudeau's statement making an equivalence of Khalistanis and then Hindu supporters of Prime Minister Modi. Where does it go from here? Is there any scope of a recovery?
Well, it's a very good question, but I think I have a guess is all I can offer you for where we go from here. And that is a deal, a grubby little deal to be sure, but a deal nonetheless, whereby the United States, Canada, and India agree, okay, look, we've all made mistakes here. We're all going to have to take our lumps. We're all going to have to make some changes. And we can spin it as best we can for our publics and say that we've won a great diplomatic victory. But we're going to have to settle this and move forward, because we can't just squabble amongst ourselves while China dominates the world. So we need the alliance with India. So I think that what that means is that the charges will largely be swept under the rug, acknowledged somehow, light sentences. Then a couple of years out of public view, off camera, somebody gets let out of jail and given a gold watch for his retirement. And everyone pledges privately, they won't say this on television, everyone acknowledges privately, okay, we're going to avoid these mistakes in the future. In Canada's case, we're going to avoid saying to India, nah, you don't have evidence. We're going to let these people say what they like. We're going to let them threaten Air India. As they did. You know, of course, that Panu, in that case, when he started threatening Air India, said, no, I'm only talking about a boycott, an economic boycott, not bombing the plane. No. Well, why then did he say that it would be risking your life to fly on Air India? How does that risk your life if it's just an economic boycott? So there needs to be a crackdown on that, uttering threats. There needs to be a crackdown in Canada on the glorification of terrorism. For example, it's a crime in the United Kingdom under their new terrorism law, but it's not a crime in Canada. Why not? Why are they doing nothing about it? And in the United States, they don't want to antagonize India. They've been more discreet and careful in their accusations. They haven't pointed the finger, as Canada has, at the Indian government per se. They're just saying an employee of the Indian government hatched this murder plot. And so the Americans will be able to get what they want, a continuing alliance with India, not upsetting the strategic relationship, which is so important, but at the same time, making it clear to the Indians that this is not how you behave. You can't be hatching murder plots on US soil. Don't try it again. I think that sort of deal is plausible.
General Katoch? You're on mute, sir.
Okay. Yeah. What Terry has said makes eminent sense, and I'll go with that. But let's understand that this hatching of plot takes place both ways. We have got the intelligence agencies of the Western powers in India, which since the 50s onwards have carried out assassinations of various people within India. Right, and evidence is available of that, but of course I won't go into that history. I think it would behove all the democracies to desist from such activities. That is one. Number two, just an incidental point. The India-Canadian relations didn't go bad during after the killing of this Nijjar fellow. It had spoiled even well before that. When Mr. Justin Trudeau came to India before that, I remember he had come to Delhi. He was coming to the foundation also. Then he goes to Punjab, and the Chief Minister of Punjab refused to meet him. So you see, there has been a very strong angst in India against this present government of Canada, that they have been continuously supporting the Khalistani terrorists. And so long as they confine their activities to Canada, it is okay by us. They are Canadian citizens. They can do what they want, and the government will deal with them. But once they start taking that poison from there and putting it here, where we have taken great pains to create peace, I think that is also unacceptable to us. So I think I'm absolutely sanguine that this is a minor blip. Things look bad now. The ambassadors have been removed, for God's sake. So it's not something which is a happy situation. But I think by the time we come to the close of 2025, there will be a distinct change, and things will improve for the better. There'll be a new government in the United States. There'll be a new government in Canada. And there'll be the same government in India. And I think the three of them can work very well. Zaffar.
Ambassador Manju, say last word to you.
Yeah, absolutely. It is important that all three countries work together, find a solution to this, and re-establish trust. I think there's been a big trust deficit over the in the last few years. That needs to be re-established, and all three, as suggested by Sir Terry and the General, it is important that they work together, find a resolution to this problem. And I think with new governments in both Canada and in the US, there may be a fresh look at the whole relationship, because from what I know, that is this relationship is important. India-Canada, India-US relationship is important for US and Canada, and of course for India.
Right. We'll have to leave it here. Thanks to all three of you for joining us today and for sharing your thoughts. And thanks to our viewers for tuning in and for watching the Mojo Story.
Thank you.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.